It was supposed to be a city on a hill, a model for Christians everywhere, a village entirely dedicated to God. Where did it go so wrong? John Hathorne, a cruel man, but one that stood for his beliefs. He took a stand during the Salem witch trials for the purity of the village, and for the death of all witches that threatened that purity. How? By giving them the death sentence one by one. In 1484, after hearing more stories of witchcraft, Pope Innocent VIII ordered that witches be rounded up and killed. Witch hunts began. All over Europe, people began to hunt for and kill suspected witches. To test if someone was a witch, they might perform the water test. Or they might jab a needle in the accused. If the person bled or felt pain, they were innocent. If they did neither, they were a witch. This was easy to fake, however. Greedy witch hunters used this fake needle tool to find more witches than the number that actually existed. Because of the fake needle tool and greedy witch hunters, the lies and false accusations surrounding witches began far before Salem's time. In the 1600s, Puritans began to distance themselves from the Church of England. They wished to purify the church and show them how they should live, entirely dedicated to God. They sailed across the Atlantic and created a city on a hill, Salem Village, Massachusetts. But when the Puritans came, their religion did too, and their belief in witches. This city on a hill was a model of Christian life. The Puritans believed that the devil would test those in Salem more than anyone else. The devil was said to take the form of a tall man very similar in appearance to the Native Americans that the colonists hated. The natives were said to worship the devil as well. It is here, with the paranoia of witches in Salem, that the foundations of the Salem witch hunt were created. In November of 1689, Salem received a new minister, Samuel Parris. He complained constantly about his salary and was not well liked for it. Parris's daughter, Betty, and niece, Abigail, mysteriously fell ill in January 1692. Other girls around the village seemed to have the same illness. The village doctor could only diagnose them as victims of witchcraft. The girls, pressured by Parris and other villagers, identified Tituba, Parris's slave. She was an easy person to blame. She was a slave, her dark skin resembled the Native Americans and the devil, and she was said to practice fortune-telling. Enter magistrates John Hathorne and Jonathan Corwin. Both were in charge of finding the witches in Salem. Both were more like prosecutors, but Hathorne in particular had a menacing and accusing demeanor and tone. In court, under Hathorne's glare, Tituba confessed and identified Sarah Osborne and Sarah Good as her co-conspirators. Good and Osborne were both outcasts in Salem society, easy to blame. All three were put into Salem's small wooden jail after Good and Osborne pleaded innocent. Osborne died there, the first death related to the trials. The afflicted girls were getting a lot of attention and had a lot of influence on the town, so it's only natural that, when more girls showed symptoms of affliction, either they were tormented by more witches, or they faked it to gain power. Either way, the town had more witches to find. Soon, Hathorne and Corwin had more people to interrogate, and almost all were found to be witches. More and more people were thrown in jail. To add insult to injury, those in jail had to pay fees for room and board. Usually, if enough people testify that someone is innocent, the defendant would be found innocent, but in Salem, that was not the case. Elizabeth Proctor was one of the accused. In court, her husband John defended her innocence. Elizabeth was found guilty, and John was also accused and found guilty, the first man to be accused of witchcraft. It is at this time, in May 1692, that the governor of Massachusetts, William Phips, saw the importance of a more official court for cases concerning witchcraft in Salem. The court of Oyer and Terminer was created. Hathorne and 7 others were appointed. Corwin later was a judge here, after one of the other judges resigned. The court of Oyer and Terminer gave the first death sentence to a woman named Bridget Bishop in June 1692. She was hanged on Gallows Hill, above what is known today as Proctor's Ledge. 18 others are hanged here, including the Proctors and a woman named Martha Corey. Her husband, Giles Corey, was also accused, but he refused to plead. He was tortured by placing a large wooden board on top of his chest, and more large rocks were placed on the board. After 2 days, he was asked if he would plead. He said simply, "More, wait." He was crushed to death that day. The accusations continued and the jail was filled with over 100 people. After his wife was accused, Governor Phipps dissolved the court of Oyer and Terminer. He lets almost all of those in jail go on the account that they were put into jail due to the use of spectral evidence in their trial. Even Tituba was released. She was never hanged. Those that pleaded innocent were the only ones that hanged. Those that pleaded guilty never did. Someone, not Samuel Parris, paid her jail fees and essentially purchased her after Parris refused to pay her fees. 5 years later, Parris was replaced by a new minister, Joseph Green. The trials were over, but their effects lingered. Now that everyone returned to their homes, one might be next-door neighbors with their accuser. Tension was high, and would be for many years. In 1702, 10 years after the trials started, the General Court declared the trials unlawful, but the damage had already been done. In 1711, Massachusetts passed a bill restoring the rights and names of those who were accused and gave £600 to their heirs as restitution. 250 years later, Massachusetts formally apologized for the trials. They had been feeling guilty. Salem Village was renamed Danvers, and many of the court records were destroyed in an effort to forget what had happened. In 1950, the play The Crucible was written and used the trials as an allegory for the McCarthyism paranoia at the time. Studies in more recent years studied what could have caused the mysterious illness, but no conclusive results have been found. A museum in Danvers holds original documents concerning the events. To this day, the public is enthralled by the events, and the museum in Danvers is a popular tourist attraction. What does this mean for John Hathorne? After the trials, he got a job as a judge in Maine. He took a stand for the purity of the town. His influence on the trials resulted in many guilty verdicts, and because the world now knows the impact of witch hunts, that outdated practice now does not exist. Because of John Hathorne and the tragedy of 1692, no longer will groups of people be hunted down and killed due to the paranoia of them being different than the majority.